This is Polyamory Weekly, tales from the front of responsible non-monogamy from a pansexual, kink-friendly point of view. A warning for our under 18 listeners. This is an adult-oriented podcast about really lascivious things, like communication and honesty in relationships. If you're under 18 and looking for upfront advice and answers to questions about sex, please visit scarletteen.com.
This is Polyamory Weekly, episode 525 for July 27th, 2017. Coming up on today's show, an interview with Goody Howard, a sex-positive superhero. Coming up on today's show. Hello, everyone. I am your host, Minx, and very happy to be back in the podcaster chair after taking 2 weeks off. It actually wasn't totally intentional. I had intended to produce the last 2 weeks. However, there have been a combination of factors that conspired against me. To be honest, being unemployed for the last 2 months is finally starting to get to me. I am trying really hard to be okay with it, but my landlord and my ridiculously expensive rent in Seattle, a little bit less okay with it. So that has been starting to wear on me. It's been a little discouraging. And then there was all the time and energy put into going to Poly Dallas Millennium, which you'll hear some of the fruits of coming up in today's podcast. It was an amazing conference. So short overview is it was a fucking amazing conference. It was a unique and blessed experience to be at a conference where people of color were front and center and people who were not of color were in the minority and got to sit back and listen to try and understand that experience and to figure out how to be better allies. So it was just an amazing event. Ruby did an amazing job putting it together. It was absolutely fabulous. But I am back in the podcaster's chair, primarily because there were so many amazing sex-positive educators that I met at Poly Dallas Millennium, whose existence I had no idea of. So you're going to be hearing from a lot of them over the coming weeks and months, because I just want to raise the profiles of absolutely everybody that I can and be as inclusive as humanly possible on the podcast. So you're going to be hearing from a lot of fabulous voices over the coming weeks and months. Our first Poly in the News article is from July 10th, which is coverage from Australia of a TV news story of a couple of women that were fired for being in a poly family. Now, as you know, in most places around the world, with some exceptions, most employers can generally fire you for no reason. There may be some specified classes of reasons for which employers can't fire you, like your race, your sex, your religion, or mistreatment. But things like relationship structure, which is what polyamory falls into, is not a protected class. Now, we do talk about this from time to time when people ask, should I come out or not? And this is one of the things I point out, that is that poly isn't a protected class. You can be fired for being poly, you can be sued for being poly, and you can have your kids taken away for being poly, depending upon the kind of judge you get. Now, this was coverage, however, of a report on TV9 News in Australia. There were two women who live in a polyamorous triad with a male partner, and they say that this particular relationship structure is why they were fired by their employer. They both worked at this same BP service station. That's a type of petrol or gas station west of Melbourne. So one of them, Laura, was already married to her husband, Michael, but then this sort of friendship and relationship bloomed with her colleague, Andrea. And then apparently they all started hanging out and they considered themselves to be a quote unquote normal poly family. However, they claim that after they were caught talking on the closed circuit TV one night, they were split up, they were banned from working together or speaking to each other. One of them, Andrea, said she was told during a shift that she was not supposed to talk about her sexuality because it was making a coworker uncomfortable. Straight and monogamous people can talk about their sexuality all they want, but if anybody who's a tad different dare talk about their quote-unquote sexuality, oh, no, it's making people uncomfortable, so you have to shut the fuck up. So they're pursuing legal action, and the TV coverage was actually very sympathetic to the women and to the triad. And, BP came back and said, hey, we're an inclusive employer. We take seriously our responsibility to provide a safe workplace, blah, 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 blah. But it's kind of a victory because the coverage is apparently not, I couldn't see it because the video from Australia couldn't be embedded into the article, which I'll provide a link to in the show notes at polyweekly.com. But the story that appeared on TV was apparently quite sympathetic. And, this is, poly proud people, not shrinking violets, being willing to step forward and say, we are poly and we have rights like everybody else. Kind of cool. Now, the next article is not a serious news article. It is, in fact, satire, but so many people posted it to my Facebook wall that I had to mention it. So it's from a site called Clickhole. So, this is serious journalism, right? The headline is, "Be prepared. Experts warn that this polyamorous relationship could expand to cover all of Seattle by 2021. And it basically said, when Adam and Kelsey started dating outside of their relationship in 2014, few expected it would grow to involve more than some close friends and Tinder matches. Today, though, experts are warning that at its current state of growth, their polyamorous relationship could expand to cover all of Seattle by 2021. Listen to this. Adam and Kelsey first came to the attention of University of Washington researchers last year, when it was discovered that their dating network already extended through most of the entirety of Seattle's circus arts community and was rapidly encompassing its live lit scene. It soon became clear that between their book groups, Catan tournaments, Kelsey's aerial silk classes, kink meetups, burner parties, and Adam's job at Microsoft, the couple's vectors for expansion were virtually limitless. According to every predictive model, the whole city would be dating, sleeping with, or part of Adam and Kelsey's polycule by 2026 at the latest. There's a diagram and everything. What I think is really funny, what I like most about this is they kind of hit all the places where you could meet poly people in Seattle. Things like book clubs, Settlers of Catan, circus arts, kink meetups, the Burning Man community, and Microsoft. There are a lot of people at Microsoft that are a lot weirder than you think they are. So that just had me laughing. Now, the things that I dislike about it, if I were to treat it as a traditional news article, is that it is, of course, couple-centric. The photograph that they used to show 4 people together toasting with wine, now 2 of them are white and 2 of them are Asian, so at least they're not completely white, and that would actually be fairly realistic for Seattle. But if you look at the diagram they provided, it is Kelsey and Adam at the center of the circle, and then everybody else connects into them. And we know that even when you're looking at things from a very couple-centric perspective, this isn't how it works. Like, one person's connected to Kelsey, but then that person might also be connected to several other people in other independent relationships. So basically, there aren't any lateral arrows. There are only arrows pointing into Kelsey and Adam. I understand they're supposed to be making fun of this. I get it. But that's not how real poly relationships work. It is pretty funny, though. And, we can say that polyamory has arrived when we are the subject of reasonably accurate satire. As I said a couple of years ago, you've arrived when The Onion is making fun of you. And next up, just one of the amazing people that I met at Poly Dallas Millennium and could not wait to bring on the podcast. I'll get straight into my interview with Goody Howard. I am thrilled to welcome to the podcast for the very first time a wonderful woman that I met at Poly Dallas Millennium, Goody Howard. Welcome to the show, Goody.
Thank you so much.
Now, because you're new to the show, I don't know how many of our listeners know you, so would you care to introduce yourself and your work to everybody?
I'd be glad to. Well, my name is Goody Howard. I am a sexual health and pleasure superhero. That's what I tell people.
Go!
I'm all about sexual exploration, education, and awareness. So I talk about toys. I do workshops about toys and pleasure and health because sexual pleasure is sexual health. I do lots of co-ed workshops, and I also teach oral technique workshops, which is exactly what it sounds like. I teach cunnilingus and fellatio, which is oral sex on a penis and oral sex on a vulva. I've been doing this 10 years. I'm a member of WACSHN, which is the Women of Color Sexual Health Network. I'm a co-organizer for Poly Dallas Millennium Symposium, where I met you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on the planning committee for the National Sex Educators Conference. And I'm doing some things with Sex Down South and Let's Talk About Sex and the Woodhull Sexual Freedom Summit.
Now, there's so many questions I want to ask you, but I'm going to start off by mentioning that you are going to Woodhull very soon, like within a couple of weeks, right?
Yeah, next week, yeah.
Yeah, and you're doing some fundraising for that trip. So do you want to give a quick pitch to anybody who might want to help send you to that conference?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Well, I'm going to Woodhull, which is August 2nd through the 6th. And I was actually gifted a registration, which is amazing, but I still have to get there. And so I had a brass clitoral ring. It's an actual statement ring that's shaped like the clitoris. And I raffled it off. I sold the tickets for $5 a piece. And actually the raffle was yesterday. So at this point, I actually met my goal for my plane ticket.
Ooh.
I met the goal. I was like $20 short. I could handle the $20, right? And so my room is partially covered and I still have to eat. So at this point, I'm just graciously accepting donations to my PayPal account, which is askgoody, ASKGOODY, at gmail.com. And that's really it. I mean, I'm floored by the amount of people that have just donated. They were like, oh, I don't need raffle tickets. Here's $10, here's $20. And you'd be surprised that those 10s and 20s collectively have paid for my plane ticket.
That's awesome.
It's amazing. I feel excited to be supported in that way, and it feels very community to me. So it makes me feel even more powerful and excited about attending this conference.
That is so exciting. Now, I met you at the event called Poly Dallas Millennium.
Yeah.
However, you yourself do not self-identify as poly, right?
Correct. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Now, for those of you who may be going, what? Why are we talking to somebody who's not poly? It's because she's awesome. But you have been a sex-positive educator for the last 10 years. So how did you get into that? How'd you start?
Well, actually, so I'm anything that is sex and sex positive and is about demystifying and making normal the conversations and movements around sex positivity, I'm all about. And Ruby Johnson, who is the CEO and creator of Poly Dallas Millennium, is one of my WACSHN colleagues. So she's a member of the Women of Color Sexual Health Network also. And I organize all my own events. I've done conference organization and things like that before. And last year, she brought me on as a volunteer. And she was like, oh, my God, Goody, I need you on staff. I need to pay you to help me get this thing, together. And she brought me on, and we've been working together ever since.
Ah, so that's how you got roped into being a co-organizer of a poly event. That's fantastic.
Yes. I mean, she's seen me at other things. I do, move in poly circles because I know people that, as a clinician, I can recognize poly people that don't know they're poly yet.
Mm.
And so I really do try to introduce them to the community. And of course, I have to go with them to make sure that they're comfortable and stuff like that. They're like, oh, well, Goody, if you go with me, I'll go. And I have an amazing husband who's like, whatever you got to do. Polynormativity is something that we strive for. And because I don't have that mono girl cringe, I don't approach it in a way that makes it feel odd. It's hard for people to believe that I'm not poly, actually, but.
Now, you mentioned that you can see when somebody is poly or might self-identify as poly if they knew it existed. So what do you do in those instances? Do you bring it up first? Do you sort of lead them there? How does that work?
Well, I also do intimacy consulting work, which is meeting with individuals and couples regarding their intimacy issues and challenges. And so, from that perspective, as a sexual health professional, I'm talking to people, and you get to know people in those interactions and those types of dynamics. And so, typically, I'll kind of bring it up as a litmus to see how they feel about it already, or what their misconceptions are, and then we kind of have a conversation unpacking, myth versus fact, and they were interested, or I wouldn't even know where to start, or something like that. And I have poly leaders in the community that I connect them to. But I can just tell based on maybe they have a consistent issue that keeps popping up, or just the way they approach love and relationships. I can kind of tell that it's like a poly 101 kind of thing, and maybe that'll be a good fit for them.
And you said that you sometimes go with them to their first poly event. That's full service.
I mean, it really is. It is. My bachelor's is in business management and development. And so I'm definitely aware of how to run a business all the way through. And I think that it's important, especially with the level of intimacy that we're dealing with, that people feel comfortable with their clinician and who they're working with. And so I really do apply my business degree on a regular basis, just because I'm familiar with how that translates. And it's a word of mouth kind of thing when you're in, the sexuality health industry. So there are like, non-sex meet and greets and things like that happen around the city for people with questions. And I think one of the biggest things for me is, because I'm not poly, I don't plan on lending my voice to the voiceless. I plan on passing the mic. So I'd rather take them to a place where I know they can get accurate information from people that are practicing, and just kind of be there to like hold their hand and babysit them if they need it.
So you do a couple of different things in your work. Mm-hmm. And by the way, excellent customer service. Very nicely done. So you do a couple of different things. It sounds like intimacy coaching. Mm-hmm. You do the co-ed sex toy parties, which I think is great because a lot of those aren't co-ed. I mean, it's preference, right? Some people prefer single gender, others don't.
And I do them all, but I definitely think that the co-ed ones are important, because when people think of sex toys, they think of big dick-shaped vibrators. They don't understand that it's so much bigger than that. And I love when the men attend the parties, because you can see the light bulb go off over their head when they finally get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, and so I offer all gender and all that, but yeah, the co-eds are my favorite.
Yeah. So I was going to say, do you have a favorite thing you like to do?
I love my blowjob classes. I love to learn. So I am actually also certified to teach high school English, reading, and language arts.
Oh, love that.
So I love to do curriculum development and lesson planning and all of that. And my babies are my fellatio, my oral technique workshops. And so that was actually my gateway drug into doing this without the sex toy parties in general. And I love doing them. I love it. I actually have a summer series here in Dallas called Lick Dallas. And what I did was I did one oral technique workshop a month in May, June, July, and August, just so people can kind of come to them and see what they are, because people are like, oh, well, when are you having another one? And so instead of booking me to do it privately for them and their friends, I secure the venue and do stuff like that and have them so people can come in and just not feel like they have to carry a whole event.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so the last one is called Head of the Class, and it's in August because it's, back to school time. So it's called Head of the Class, and it's August 26th. So, but the fellatio workshops are my favorite.
And now, is that because, did you purchase from a marketing angle, like it's the biggest need, or is it just because it's your favorite thing that, you enjoy and enjoy teaching, or both?
I think both, but because when people come to the fellatio workshop, it's all fun and games, and we play games. Everybody, it's a ice-breaking situation because you are in a room full of people practicing oral sex on a suction cup penis. So it's team building, right? So everyone is closer than they were before they got there. But what I found is that it's a great way to make people more comfortable with me. And then they come back. It's like, again, the business degree. It is, the hook, right? So they come in for that and they're like, oh, well, Goody, what about this? Or I have a question about this. Or, oh, me and my partner need to meet with you about this. And so it just makes people more comfortable with me. They can see how capable I am, how professional I am. my level of customer service, and it kind of makes them, it demystifies and unpacks what they think a sex consultant is or a sex
Mm-hmm.
therapist is, and it makes them feel like it's okay. It makes it less taboo.
Yeah, definitely. You described yourself as a superhero. So if you have a superhero power, is this it? What would you call your
Yes, I
superhero
would
power?
say, yeah, I would say the ability to make people comfortable with, like, I talk about sex and sexuality like it's Tupperware. I mean, in the spaces that we operate in, that is Tupperware. But in
Hmm.
Texas, in the South, the Texas is the buckle of the Bible Belt. It's really, really hard to kind of navigate those casual conversations about sex and sexuality. And I think that is one of my superhero powers, just to be able to do that and make people comfortable with it. No one's clutching any pearls. No one is offended, you know. And so it really, really is, I think, one of my superpowers.
That is fantastic. And by the way, I haven't heard pearl clutching in so long I had to laugh. That's
Oh no,
fantastic.
and they do it for real down here. Like pearls will be clutched in Texas. That's
Oh my goodness. I didn't see any pearls while I was there, but I was at, Poly Dallas Millennium the whole time. So yeah,
yeah,
there you
yeah,
go.
yeah, yeah. Very true. You got to come back next year because we're adding a whole new entertainment component and all kinds of stuff are happening. So I'm really hoping you guys come back.
I would love to. I learned so much this year. It was such a pleasure to be able to sort of sit and listen most of the time
Hmm.
and not be
Hmm.
teaching a lot. I mean, I love teaching like you. I also come from an educational background, but it was nice to be able to understand that I was primarily there to listen because, thank you for that segue. So
Uh-huh.
for those who maybe just started listening and who haven't heard me talk about this for the last 6 months, Poly Dallas Millennium was specifically to put forward and center on people of color, which I am not. I am just about as lily white as they come. And I grew up in a lily white suburb not far from where the event was held. I guess I want to ask you about your work and people of color, what it is that is important for the world to know about the sex positive world and people of color.
I think that the biggest thing that everyone should know about people of color and sex positive spaces is that even though the space, typically in a sex positive space, you do have much more aware individuals. Even if it is a racially mixed room, everyone in that room is aware that it's a sex positive space. And therefore, there's a higher level of operation, right? There's a higher thought process. But even in these elevated spaces, racism and colorism and things like that come into play. I think that it's important that people understand that sexuality and sex positive industry, sex education industry, all that kind of stuff is a fairly new field, and it's dominated by a cisgender straight community, male typically, white cisgendered men. And so what Wakshan and other organizations and agencies like it strive to do is help normalize the narrative of people of color in sex positive spaces. We make moves to help us get paid for things that our white counterparts are being paid for, but we are expected to donate.
Mm.
Be it a keynote, a workshop lead, anything like that. We have our white counterparts being paid for those things, whereas the professionals of color are expected to donate for exposure. Do you see my air quotes?
Mm-hmm.
Exposure. My kids can't eat exposure.
Yeah.
And so for me, as a woman of color operating in these spaces, I think it's amazing the strides that we've made just as far as inclusion goes, but the equity is not there yet. And even in the polyamory, you saw some of the workshops were talking about being poly and being a person of color
Mm-hmm.
and how you're either fetishized or otherized in sexual spaces. And so that kind of thing still exists. It's still a thing. And then people, when you talk about poly or a lot of even the things I talk about, they say, oh, that's not for us, or that's white people stuff. And we have to work on our side to kind of let our people know, let people of color know, no, this isn't white people stuff. This is what it is. It's been going on for, since the beginning of time, and just kind of exposing people to a different way of thinking about things.
Yeah, I did hear that a lot at Poly Dallas Millennium, that a lot of the feedback was, oh, this is white people stuff. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Now, speaking of which, so the one thing I did do and get up on stage and do at Poly Dallas Millennium was to give one of the keynotes. I was the only keynote speaker. There were 4 or 5. I was the only one who wasn't a person of color, which I was very honored that Ruby trusted me to do that. And it did not go well. I realized immediately, like during and after thousands of mistakes that I made, and have been beating myself up about it ever since. And since you were there, could you basically school me in what I did wrong and what I could do differently next time?
Okay. Well, first of all, I think you did a great job. I don't want you to feel like you bombed it or anything like that. As the only non-POC keynote, that in and of itself is an amazing thing. So I think that the fact that she chose you to do it and trusted you to do it should speak to your ability. I don't know that you did anything wrong. I think that there were definitely opportunities for improvement or things that you maybe missed. But I will say this. I think you did a great job of talking about privilege in a way that other white people can appreciate. Because when people of color have conversations with white people about privilege, the first thing they do is try to distance themselves from what they interpret the word privilege to mean. So they're going to tell you how poor they grew up or how much they struggled or how this or how that, how they were disadvantaged, when that's not really what privilege is. Your analogy of crossing the street was a perfect analogy of what privilege is, because you don't recognize privilege. That's the nature of privilege. And so I think that you did an amazing job of just highlighting what privilege is and how it works without even addressing it to being people of color, right? So you did tie it back into the podcast and how you operate and things like that later on, but just your examples of privilege were very spot on in a way that I think other white people can appreciate. Now, I will say that I think that your presentation was good, but I think it was geared toward white people.
Yeah, I didn't realize that until I was done.
But you know what? But that's what that's your truth, and I think that the presentation that you gave in a white space would change so many lives. Do you see what I'm saying? Because what you were you were preaching to the choir as far as we're concerned, because we're aware of it. But if you were to give that exact same presentation in a non-person of color dominated space, it would have so much impact.
Well, thank you for saying that. And I do appreciate that. I do want to improve. So you said there were opportunities for improvement and things that were omitted that could have been better. And I would love it if you could share those with me.
Okay. Like when you were talking about the inclusion of the pictures and when you searched for Google, trying to make the podcast pictures and things like that much more inclusive, I think that's great. And having people of color on the podcast. And you actually mentioned it yourself. It wasn't one of your slides, but you were saying how you didn't even think, or maybe you said it to me, an email, that you didn't even think about having POC on the show to not talk about POC things, but to actually talk about the work that they do.
Yeah, right. That was only recently. It was only a couple of months ago that I realized I was pigeonholing and would only bring people of color on to talk about race and not about the million other things related to polyamory or their work or whatever. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And that right there is revolutionary, because that helps minimize the impression that, this is white people stuff. Because if we're only brought on to talk about our experiences as people of color, as opposed to our experiences as polyamory people or our experiences as sex professionals or anything like that, we are not seen, again, you're, typecast or whatever, right? So we're not seen as professionals navigating in these spaces. So have, like, an example, having me on today to talk about my work, and then we're talking about Poly Dallas Symposium. This is a prime example of going beyond just having us on to talk about racial issues.
Okay, so you're being very kind, but I want to know what more I can do.
Oh, okay. So I think the more you can do, basically, just making sure that you're more inclusive, because the equity and inequality are different. So as a white woman, I know, like you said, you don't really operate in spaces. I loved the brutal honesty. You were like, I'm gonna go home and I'm not gonna think about this again because I don't have to. I think maybe when you said you were reading the room, a lot of people were like, oh my God, I can't believe she said that. But
Oh dear.
that's honestly, people are like, oh, did she really just say? And I'm like, but that's real life. Like, she doesn't have to think about this stuff. And so the fact that you understand that you don't have to think about it, and then you're talking about making a concerted effort to think about these things more, when you don't have to, understanding that you have the luxury to avoid it. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. So I would love to have heard you maybe qualify that statement and talk
Mm.
more about that. You know what I'm saying? Because it's people were like, oh, and I was like, no, that's real life. Like, she doesn't have to think about this ever again if she doesn't want to. The fact that she wants to is what you should be focused on.
Mm.
And so that to me is really what stood out as a major opportunity to improve. Just some of the statements like that were amazing and should have been qualified.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate your saying that. And for those who are listening, we did check with Goody beforehand to make sure that she was okay with giving this type of feedback. I'm actually very eager for it because it turned out I did not just go home and not think about it again. I actually have been tearing my hair out trying to figure out all the things I did wrong and what I can do to improve in the future. So that actually was not true. And you very kindly agreed to give some feedback since I was specifically requesting it.
Right.
Is there anything else? I do want to get back to talking about you before we close out, but was there, any other advice you would give for somebody like me who wants to be an ally and who tries, but just really wants to be able to speak to and speak with and be inclusive of people of color on a daily and weekly basis?
Like earlier when I said giving voice to the voiceless versus passing the mic. I think that I don't know if you've ever heard this thought process before, but the white savior complex. And a lot of times white people that are not purposely trying to be white saviors, right? They're just trying to give a voice to the voiceless.
Mm.
Instead of doing that, passing the mic is a better, more effective way of becoming an ally. So if someone reaches out to you to talk about a topic or whatever, even if it's not your wheelhouse, or if you're busy that day, or whatever the case may be, if you have a person of color in your Rolodex that will be better suited for that, pass the mic to that person.
Gotcha. It seems like it should be obvious, and that is fantastic advice.
And that's the kind of thing that we work towards, because we want to make sure that we're being, they're reaching out to you. They're not reaching out to you to try to do something for exposure. This is a paid opportunity. So if you have someone, in your network that may be better suited for it, that just happens to be a person of color, that will be even better. Like if you would do it if it was a woman, like that's like a man giving a talk about abortion rights or something.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, kind of.
Something like that, right? So I think that's the first and foremost, the thing that any white person can do that is trying to be an ally is to pass the mic. Don't speak up for, but give an opportunity for those to speak, or practice, or be a clinician, or whatever the opportunity is. Also, the call in versus the call out. I'm not sure if you were in that workshop. I know Wes was in the workshop. I think you guys were there. It was a blur for me, but there was a workshop that kind of got derailed because there was a white woman in the room that felt the need to set herself apart from her privilege, and it just spiraled out of control.
So what is the principle of call in versus call out? I don't think I was in that one, but I've definitely heard that happen many times. Can you briefly explain call in versus call out?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So my biggest point of with white allies is to call in and call out. So call in is more like this, right? If this wasn't the podcast, it would be like, hey, so Cunning, this is some stuff that I saw. It's a private addressing of something that could have been done differently. That's the call in, right? So you're not embarrassing someone, you're not putting them on the defensive, and they may be able to better receive your message. A call out is a very public addressing of what happened. Now, sometimes a call out is more effective. It just depends on what the transgression is.
Gotcha. It's sort of like the business principle of the compliments should always be public and criticism should always be private.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And there are some people that are just not going to learn until their ass is in the fire, period. Some people have to learn the hard way. And so sometimes a call out is more appropriate. Like when these companies do stuff that's problematic and there's like this backlash, like Twitter explodes or something because some company did, that's a call out. And it needs to be a call out because it affects the way the company is perceived. Therefore, it makes them want to change something. But if you have a one-on-one way to reach out to somebody that's doing something that's problematic, then you can call in and they may be more receptive to it. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think most people would be.
But if it's coming from someone they respect, then absolutely. Especially if it's a white person talking to another white person. That's, to me, is the third thing. So the first thing is pass the mic. The second thing is the call in, call out culture. And the third thing is just educating yourself on what microaggressions are, educating yourself on how systemic racism works so that you can recognize when it's happening so you can talk to your white peers about it. Because since people of color didn't create systemic racism and privilege and things of that nature, we're not the ones that are going to be able to dismantle those systems.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much for giving me that feedback. I really appreciate it. And
thank you for being receptive to it.
Yeah, well, and I learned so much. It really was a luxury to be able to go to an event and just really listen, especially listening to people of color when, as you know, at most sex positive events that I go to, people of color make up like maybe 10%. There may be just a few people in the room that may or may not speak up. And so the voices aren't heard. It was amazing to be in a room that was very often 70, 80, 90% people of color, where
you were the minority. Imagine that.
I know. And it was, it has happened to me before, but it's pretty rare, actually, as you know. And it's just so amazing that Ruby created this, you and Ruby together created this space, and that, I got to be there and attend and listen to, people of color talking about the challenges they face in, the whole sex positive world. There were all kinds of seminars. So it was really amazing.
Yeah, I want to say that Ruby is the CEO and creator of Poly Dallas Millennium. She is amazing. She did a great job curating the workshops and things like that. All I did was come in and use my superhero powers. I was and organizing and just making sure people were comfortable and things like that, and try to help make it run smoothly. I was there for like coordination. Everything that you guys experienced is all Ruby. And she is a treasure. She is such a gem. I'm just excited to be on board to help her make her baby a thing, So I'm excited to even be a part of it.
Very modest of you. Coordination is a superpower as well.
Yay.
But let's get back to what you said was your original superpower. For those who are listening who have become absolutely entranced with you and are maybe in Texas and want to attend your workshops, or I don't know if you do remote coaching for people who aren't in Texas, but they're like, I want to talk to Goody.
I do, and I travel.
Awesome. Okay. So how can people find you, and where do they get hold of you?
Okay, well, again, my business degree kicked in when I started thinking about my contact information. So I am Ask Goody, AskGoody, on everything. I'm Ask Goody on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. I'm working on getting enough subscribers to get my vanity URL on my YouTube. So if you go to my YouTube, go ahead and subscribe so I can get my vanity URL and be Ask Goody on YouTube as well. My website is askgoody.com. My email address is askgoody@gmail.com.
That is so amazing. I'm a marketer by profession, and I got cunning minks most places, but some places I couldn't get cunning minks. So sometimes it's cunning.minks or cunning_minks because I didn't join the network fast enough. So good for you.
Yeah,
that is fantastic.
I don't even use. Every time a new platform comes out, I'll get it. Whether I use it or not, but I have it in case.
So very
like
smart.
I have a Periscope. I've never used Periscope, but I have it.
They actually have some really weird policies about explicit content and owning your content. So no loss there. And again, as a reminder, if you wanted to help Goody get to the Woodhull trip next week, you can send her a donation through PayPal at askgoody@gmail.com.
Absolutely. And that's another thing we were talking about, accessibility, how when you go to these sex positive spaces, we're like 10% of the room, if that. I'm a firm believer that it's not revolutionary if it's not accessible. This is an operation in accessibility. This is a way to up our percentage a little bit, our representation, because typically what we end up doing is absorbing this information and then taking it back to our communities.
That's fantastic. Goody, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you. Any parting words, any final thoughts, any last thing you want our listeners to know before we say goodbye?
I don't know. Like I was just like, yay, it was so fun. Like, I really do appreciate, I do appreciate being able to have a conversation with you and just talk about all the things that we talked about today. I'm excited to see how you manifest your awareness. I will be watching. I'm so excited to see how you do it. Like ominously, I will be watching.
I know. I'm like, oh shit, because I'm going to mess up again, right? I'm going to mess up again. Just please forgive me when I mess up.
But I love you, and I will call in if need be. I will call in because that's the nature of how it works.
Awesome.
So don't even worry about it, sis. We got you. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to speak to you and your community and your followers and your fans and things like that.
I got to ask, are you willing to come back?
Of course. Of course.
Awesome. Goody, it's been such a pleasure talking with you. Thank you. I can't wait to have you back on.
Absolutely.
Thanks again to Goody for taking the time to meet with us and to share her experiences and her expertise. And yes, we are going to bring her back on the show, hopefully within a couple of weeks or months. I'm thinking we might want to have her talking about her favorite, which she said her favorite subject was oral sex. So, start prepping those questions for her. And our donation this week was from Chris, who actually left a little message with it saying, "Your podcast is still my favorite. I wanted to make a donation to celebrate my wife and my girlfriend going on their first official date after a very rocky couple of months where they couldn't decide whether to pursue a relationship or not. Keep up the great work." Well, Chris, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. And thanks for the $69.96. Love those numbers. And thank you for listening, because without you listeners, there would be no podcast. We would be on permanent hiatus. So we really appreciate your listening. We appreciate your donations if you can make them. We do keep this podcast as a free resource to help hundreds of thousands of people navigate their introduction to polyamory. If you have questions, comments, or feedback, email polyweekly@gmail.com. Call 802-505-POLY to leave a comment on the listener comment line. Or you can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/polyweekly, on Twitter @polyweekly or @cunningminx, or on Instagram, where I don't even know what all the other sites are. Those are the main ones. I will say thank you for listening. Thanks, Goody, for coming on the show. And remember, it's not all about the sex.